The dress had survived 3 years of wear, 2 cross-country train rides, and 1 desperate midnight escape from a boarding house where the landlady had threatened to burn everything Theresa Jenkins owned if she did not pay the back rent by morning. Now, standing on the wooden platform of the train station in Shoshone City, Idaho Territory, in the sweltering heat of July 1882, Theresa smoothed the faded blue cotton over her hips and tried not to think about the frayed hem or the careful stitches holding the left sleeve together. The dress had been beautiful once, with its modest neckline and tiny pearl buttons running down the bodice. Her mother had sewn it for her 18th birthday, back when the world still made sense, and food appeared on the table every evening without fail. That had been 5 years ago, in a different lifetime, before the fever took both her parents within a week of each other, and left Theresa alone in Philadelphia with nothing but debts, and the kind of desperation that made answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride seem not just reasonable but necessary. The man in the advertisement had called himself Peter Donnelly, a rancher in need of a wife who could cook, clean, and handle the isolation of life far from city conveniences. The letter had been direct, almost businesslike, but there had been something in the careful script that suggested education and a steady hand. Theresa had written back immediately, spending her last few coins on postage, and 3 weeks later his response arrived with a train ticket and instructions to arrive in Shoshone City before the end of July. She scanned the platform now, clutching her small carpetbag close to her chest. A few other passengers disembarked around her, locals greeting them with warm embraces and excited chatter. But no one approached Theresa, and with each passing minute her heart sank lower. Perhaps he had changed his mind. Perhaps he had taken one look at her stepping off the train, seen the worn dress and the dust of travel, and decided she was not worth claiming after all. The platform cleared. The train whistle blew, announcing its intention to continue toward Boise. Theresa stood alone, trying very hard not to cry. "Miss Jenkins," she turned sharply. A man approached from the far end of the platform, moving with the unhurried gait of someone accustomed to long days in the saddle. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate sparingly, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. His clothes were clean but worn, work clothes of a rancher, not the Sunday best she might have expected for meeting a bride. But his eyes, a startling shade of blue-gray, held a directness that made her breath catch. "Mr. Donnelly." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He stopped a few feet away, removed his hat, and studied her with an expression she could not quite read. His gaze traveled from her face down to her dress, lingering on the careful repairs, the faded fabric, the hem that no amount of brushing could make pristine again. Theresa lifted her chin, meeting his eyes with what little pride she had left. "I know I am not much to look at after the journey. The dress is old. It is all I have that is suitable for meeting you. I am sorry if it is disappointing." Something shifted in his expression, softening the angular lines of his face. "One good dress," he said quietly. "That is one more than my mother had when she came west with my father. She wore the same calico every day for 2 years until they could afford fabric for another." Heat rushed to Theresa's cheeks. "I will work hard, Mr. Donnelly. I can cook and clean. I am strong and I am not afraid of difficulty. If you still want a wife, I will do my best to be what you need." He was quiet for a long moment, his hat turning slowly in his hands. Then he looked up at her again, and there was something almost tender in his gaze. "Then you are dressed for my heart," he said simply. "A woman who knows hardship and has not let it break her. A woman who takes care of what she has. That is worth more than all the fancy dresses in a Philadelphia shop window." Theresa felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. She had not realized how desperately she needed to hear something kind, something that did not weigh and measure her worth in money or appearance. "Thank you," she whispered. Peter Donnelly settled his hat back on his head and reached for her carpetbag. "The wagon is just over there. It is about an hour ride to the ranch. I hope you do not mind that I did not bring anything fancier. The buckboard is what we use for supplies." "I do not mind at all." Theresa fell into step beside him, her legs unsteady after so many days on the train. "I am grateful you came at all. I thought perhaps you had changed your mind." "I was late," he admitted, leading her toward a sturdy wagon hitched to two dappled gray horses. "One of the mares decided this morning was the perfect time to foal, and I could not leave her. But I would not have missed meeting you, Miss Jenkins. I have been thinking about your arrival for weeks." He helped her up onto the wagon seat with a steady hand, his touch brief but warm. Theresa arranged her skirts and tried to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. This man would be her husband, likely within the next few days. She knew almost nothing about him beyond what his letters had revealed. He was 26 years old, a widower who had lost his first wife to pneumonia 2 years earlier. He ran a horse ranch that his father had started before Idaho was even a territory. He had no children, no close family, and needed a partner to help manage the household. The letters had been factual, almost sparse, but they had also been honest. He had not made promises he could not keep or painted a false picture of easy living. Theresa had appreciated that honesty more than flowery words. As Peter climbed up beside her and took the reins, she studied his profile. He had a strong jaw, a straight nose that looked like it might have been broken once, and the weathered skin of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. His hands were scarred and calloused, working hands, but they held the reins with gentleness. "I should tell you," he said as he urged the horses forward, "the ranch is not fancy. It is comfortable enough, but it is just me and a hired hand named Samuel who helps with the horses. You will be the only woman for miles around. The nearest neighbor is the Miller family, about 3 miles east. Sarah Miller is a kind woman. She will likely visit once she knows you are here." "I am not afraid of isolation," Theresa said. "Philadelphia had people everywhere, but I was lonely just the same. Sometimes crowds are the loneliest places." He glanced at her, something like approval in his expression. "That is a wise observation." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon rattling over the dirt road that led north from town. The landscape was unlike anything Theresa had ever seen, vast and open, with rolling hills covered in sagebrush and distant mountains purple against the horizon. The sky seemed impossibly large, stretching endlessly in all directions, and the air smelled of dust and wild grass and something clean she could not name. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "Different from home, but beautiful." "It grows on you," Peter agreed. "Some people cannot stand it. The emptiness drives them a little mad. But if you let it, the land gets into your blood. My father used to say this territory demanded everything from you, but if you were willing to give it, the land gave back tenfold." "Was your father a rancher too?" "He was a lot of things. Started as a trapper, then tried mining for a while. Finally settled on horses because he said they made more sense than people most of the time." Peter's voice held affection and old grief. "He died 6 years ago. My mother followed a year later. I think she just did not want to go on without him." "I am sorry." Theresa knew that particular pain intimately. "My parents died within days of each other. Yellow fever. It swept through our neighborhood like wildfire. So we are both orphans then." Peter's tone was matter of fact but not unkind. "Maybe that is why your letter stood out to me. You wrote about losing everything but finding the strength to start over. That took courage." It took desperation, Theresa corrected gently. I answered your advertisement because I had nowhere else to go. Honest desperation is still courage. He met her eyes briefly before returning his attention to the road. You could have made other choices, ones that would have been easier in the short term but harder on your soul. Theresa understood what he meant. She had seen other young women in her situation turn to less respectable means of survival. She would not judge them for it, but she had wanted something different for herself, even if it meant marrying a stranger and traveling 2,000 miles into the unknown. Can I ask you something? She ventured after another stretch of silence. Of course. Why did you wait 2 years after your wife's death to seek another? Most men remarry quickly out here, from what I understand. Peter's jaw tightened slightly. Anna was a good woman. She did not deserve what happened to her. I needed time to grieve properly, and I needed to be sure I could offer something real to another wife, not just fill a hole Anna left behind. That would not be fair to anyone. The honesty in his words touched something deep in Theresa's chest. What was she like? Kind, quiet. She loved to garden, spent hours trying to coax vegetables from the dry soil. He smiled faintly. She had more patience than I ever will. We married young, barely knew each other, but we built something good. It was not the passionate love from storybooks, but it was real and steady. That sounds like enough, Theresa said. More than enough, actually. It was. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. I am not expecting to replace what I had with Anna. I am not expecting you to be her, but I am hoping we can build something of our own. Something that belongs just to us. I would like that. Theresa meant it. She did not want to live in the shadow of a dead woman, but she respected that Peter had loved his first wife and grieved her honestly. The ranch appeared as they crested a low hill. It was modest, as Peter had promised, but well maintained. The house was a simple wooden structure, painted white with green shutters, surrounded by several corrals and a large barn. Horses grazed in the nearest pasture, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. A vegetable garden sprawled beside the house, slightly overgrown but still producing. Anna's garden, Peter said, following her gaze. I try to keep it going, but I do not have her touch. Maybe you will have better luck. I will certainly try. Theresa studied the ranch with growing interest. It was small, yes, but it was clean and organized, the fences in good repair, the barn door hanging straight on its hinges. A man who took care of his property would likely take care of his wife as well. A young man emerged from the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on his trousers. He was perhaps 19 or 20, with a shock of red hair and a face full of freckles. That is Samuel, Peter said, waving to the young man. He is a hard worker and keeps to himself. His family has a farm about 10 miles south, but he stays here most of the time during busy seasons. Samuel helped them unload, stealing curious glances at Theresa but keeping quiet. Peter introduced them briefly, and Samuel stammered a polite greeting before retreating back to the barn, his ears bright red. He is shy around women, Peter explained, leading Theresa toward the house. But he is good with the horses, and that is what matters. The inside of the house was neat but spare, decorated with the bare minimum of furniture and personal items. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A hallway led to what Theresa assumed were bedrooms. I cleaned yesterday, Peter said, sounding almost nervous. There are 2 bedrooms. You can have the larger one, the one Anna and I shared. I have been sleeping in the smaller room anyway. I thought you might want privacy until we are married proper. Theresa set down her carpetbag and turned to face him. When were you planning the wedding? I spoke to Reverend Matthews in town. He can perform the ceremony tomorrow afternoon if you are willing. Or we can wait if you need more time to be certain." Peter's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Tomorrow is fine," Theresa said. She did not see the point in delaying. They were both adults who understood the practical nature of their arrangement. Waiting would only draw out the awkwardness. "Unless you have doubts." "No doubts." He relaxed slightly. "I will ride back to town early tomorrow morning to let the Reverend know. Sarah Miller too, if you want a witness besides Samuel." "That would be kind, thank you." They stood looking at each other for a moment, two strangers about to bind their lives together, and Theresa felt a strange mix of fear and hope. Peter Donnelly seemed like a good man, an honest man. That was more than many women could say about their husbands. "I should show you the rest of the house," Peter said finally, breaking the silence. "And then I will let you rest. You must be exhausted from traveling." He gave her a tour of the small house, pointing out where things were kept, apologizing for the lack of feminine touches. The larger bedroom was indeed spacious, with a real bed frame and mattress, a dresser and a washstand. The window looked out over the pastures and the mountains beyond. "It is perfect," Theresa assured him. "Truly. I have stayed in far worse places." "Anna made curtains for that window," Peter said softly, touching the simple white fabric. "But they are getting threadbare. Maybe you can make new ones someday if you want. I would like that." Theresa moved to the window, looking out at the land that would be her new home. The sun was beginning to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Thank you, Peter, for giving me this chance." He came to stand beside her, not quite touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Thank you for being brave enough to take it." That evening, Peter prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and fresh bread that he admitted Sarah Miller had brought by the day before. They ate at the small table, making awkward conversation about the ranch, the weather, the journey from Philadelphia. Samuel joined them briefly but ate quickly and excused himself to finish evening chores. "He will warm up to you eventually," Peter said after the young man left. "He is just not used to having a woman around." "I remember being that age," Theresa said with a small smile. "Everything felt overwhelming and embarrassing all at once." "You are what, 23 now?" Peter asked, then looked embarrassed. "I should remember from your letters." 23 as of last March, and you are 26 if I recall correctly." "Just." He cleared their plates and brought them to the wash basin. "I will help you with the dishes. It does not seem right to make you work your first night here." They washed up together, developing an easy rhythm despite the newness of their situation. Peter washed while Theresa dried and put things away where he directed. It was domestic and oddly comforting. "I should let you retire," Peter said once they finished. "You must be exhausted and tomorrow will be a long day." "Peter," Theresa said as he turned to go, "I am glad it was you who answered my letter. I know we barely know each other, but I have a good feeling about this." His expression softened. "So do I, Theresa, so do I." She lay in the large bed that night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Horses whinnied in the distance. The wind whispered through the eaves. Somewhere an owl called out, hunting in the night. It was all so different from the city sound she had known her entire life, but it did not frighten her. Tomorrow she would become Theresa Donnelly, wife of a rancher, mistress of this small piece of Idaho territory. It was not the life she had imagined as a girl, but it felt right in a way she had not expected. Peter seemed kind and steady, exactly the sort of man a sensible woman would choose if she had the luxury of choosing. And the way he had looked at her dress, the way he had understood what it represented without her having to explain, that had touched something in her heart she thought had gone cold during the difficult years after her parents' death. Maybe, she thought as sleep finally claimed her, maybe this arrangement could become something more than just practical necessity. Maybe they could build the kind of partnership Peter had mentioned, something real and lasting. Morning came bright and early, announced by a rooster Theresa had not known existed. She dressed in her good blue dress again, brushed and pinned her dark hair with care, and emerged from the bedroom to find Peter already dressed in what must have been his best clothes, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. "I have coffee," he said, gesturing to the pot on the stove. "And there is bread left from last night. I need to ride to town, but I will be back by noon with the Reverend and Sarah Miller. Will you be all right here with Samuel, of course?" Theresa poured herself coffee and found she was less nervous than she expected. "I might work on the garden a bit if that is all right. Keep myself busy." "Anything you want to do is fine. This is your home now, Theresa. You do not need my permission." He settled his hat on his head and paused at the door. "You look beautiful, by the way. That dress brings out the blue in your eyes." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her blushing and smiling into her coffee cup. She spent the morning exploring the ranch properly, introducing herself to the horses in the near pasture, examining the garden and planning what could be salvaged and what needed replanting. Samuel appeared occasionally, always working on some task, offering shy nods but no conversation. Around mid-morning, a wagon approached from the east. Theresa shaded her eyes and watched as it drew closer, revealing a plump woman with graying hair and a warm smile. "You must be Theresa," the woman called out, climbing down from the wagon with surprising agility. "I am Sarah Miller. Peter told my husband yesterday that you were arriving, and I simply could not wait until the wedding to meet you. I hope you do not mind me intruding." "Not at all," Theresa said, genuinely pleased. "I am glad for the company." Sarah bustled forward and took Theresa's hands in hers, studying her with kind brown eyes. "Oh, you are a pretty thing, and you look like you have some steel in your spine. That is good. You will need it out here. Now, have you eaten properly?" Men never feed anyone properly when left to their own devices. Before Theresa could answer, Sarah was already heading into the house, carrying a basket that proved to be full of fresh eggs, butter, jam, and a cake that smelled of cinnamon and apples. "I thought you might need a few things," Sarah said, unpacking her offerings with efficient movements. "And I wanted to help you get ready for the wedding. Do you have something special to wear? If not, I brought a lace collar that was my daughter's. She lives in Oregon now, married to a blacksmith, and she would want you to have it." "I only have the one dress," Theresa admitted, touched by the woman's generosity. "But it is clean and mended. Peter seemed to think it was fine. Of course he did, dear man that he is." Sarah smiled warmly. "Peter Donnelly sees with his heart more than his eyes, always has. But we can still make you feel special. Every bride deserves that." They spent the next hour in easy companionship, Sarah chattering about the area, the neighbors, the challenges and joys of life in Idaho territory. Theresa absorbed it all, grateful for the information and even more grateful for the friendship being offered so freely. Peter's first wife was a sweet girl, Sarah said as she helped Theresa pin the delicate lace collar to her dress. "But she was fragile, never quite suited to the hardness of this life. You are different, I can tell. You have survived things that would break softer people. You and Peter will be good for each other." "I hope so," Theresa said softly. "I want to be a good wife to him. Just be yourself, dear." "That is all any good man wants." Sarah stepped back to admire her work. "There now, you look lovely. Peter will not be able to take his eyes off you." They heard horses approaching, and Sarah peered out the window. "That will be him now, and Reverend Matthews too. Come on, let's get you married." Theresa's heart began to pound as she followed Sarah outside. Peter dismounted and walked toward her, and she saw his steps slow as he took in her appearance. The lace collar transformed the simple dress, adding an elegance that made her feel truly bridal. "Theresa," he said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse quicken. "You are beautiful." Reverend Matthews, a portly man with a white beard and twinkling eyes, cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed with the ceremony? I have another appointment in town this evening." They gathered in front of the house, with the mountains and endless sky as their cathedral. Samuel stood awkwardly to one side while Sarah beamed with delight. The Reverend opened his Bible and began the familiar words of the marriage ceremony. Theresa found herself focusing on Peter's face as they spoke their vows. He looked at her steadily, seriously, his voice firm as he promised to honor and care for her. When it was her turn, she meant every word she said, surprising herself with the depth of her sincerity. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews declared. "Peter, you may kiss your bride." Peter stepped closer, his hands gentle as he cradled her face. "May I?" he whispered, so quietly only she could hear. "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, warm and soft and careful. It was a brief kiss, appropriate for their audience, but Theresa felt it all the way to her toes. Sarah clapped her hands together with delight. "Congratulations! Now I brought food for a small celebration. We cannot let the occasion pass without at least a meal together." They ate the feast Sarah had prepared, laughing and talking, and Theresa felt the knot of anxiety in her chest slowly unwind. This was her family now, such as it was. Peter, Samuel, the kind neighbors like Sarah and her husband who arrived shortly after with more food and hearty congratulations. As the sun began to set and their guests prepared to leave, Sarah pulled Theresa aside. "If you need anything at all, dear, you send Samuel to fetch me. Being a wife takes some getting used to, especially the more private aspects. Do not be afraid to ask questions." Theresa blushed but nodded. She had a vague understanding of what happened between husbands and wives, gleaned from whispered conversations with married friends and one rather awkward lecture from an aunt. But the reality of it, with Peter tonight, was suddenly very immediate. Peter walked the Reverend out while Theresa helped Sarah pack up the remaining food. "He is a good man," Sarah said again. "Be patient with each other. That is the secret to a happy marriage." When everyone had finally gone and Samuel had tactfully retreated to the barn for the night, Theresa and Peter stood in the kitchen, suddenly alone as husband and wife for the first time. "Would you like more coffee?" Peter asked, sounding as nervous as she felt. "No, thank you." Theresa twisted her hands together. "Peter, I should tell you I do not have much experience with marital matters. I mean, I understand the basic concept, but I am not entirely sure what to expect." He moved closer, taking her hands in his to still their nervous movements. "Neither of us needs to have expectations tonight. We are both tired and it has been a long day. Let's just go to bed together and see what feels right. There is no rush, Theresa. We have the rest of our lives." Relief flooded through her. "You mean that, of course." He lifted one of her hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I want you to feel safe with me always. Anything that happens between us should be because we both want it, not because we feel obligated." They prepared for bed with an awkwardness that was almost endearing, taking turns changing in the bedroom while the other waited in the kitchen. When Theresa finally emerged in her nightgown, Peter was already under the covers on the far side of the bed, leaving plenty of room for her. She climbed in beside him, her heart racing. The bed that had seemed so large last night now felt impossibly small with another person in it. "Good night, Theresa," Peter said softly into the darkness. "Good night," she whispered back. They lay in silence for a while, both clearly awake but pretending otherwise. Then Peter spoke again, his voice low. "Can I hold you, just hold you? I would like to fall asleep with my wife in my arms." Theresa felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Yes, I would like that too." She felt him move closer, his arm sliding carefully around her waist, drawing her back against his chest. He was warm and solid, and after a moment of uncertainty, Theresa let herself relax into his embrace. "This is nice," she murmured. "Yes, it is." Peter's breath stirred her hair. "Sleep well, my wife. My wife." The words settled into Theresa's heart, and she smiled into the darkness. She had become a mail-order bride out of desperation, had arrived in Idaho territory with nothing but a worn dress and a prayer for a better life. But lying here in Peter's arms, listening to his breathing slow and deepen as sleep claimed him, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt hope. The following days fell into a rhythm that surprised Theresa with its ease. She woke early with Peter, made breakfast for him and Samuel, then spent her days cleaning the house, working in the garden, and learning the routines of the ranch. Peter was patient when she made mistakes, quick to praise when she did something well, and increasingly affectionate in small, sweet ways that made her heart flutter. Each night they shared a bed, and each night they held each other a little longer, talked a little more openly, allowed their touches to become slightly less careful. Peter never pushed, never demanded, but Theresa could sense his growing desire matched by her own unexpected feelings. She had not anticipated wanting him physically, but his gentle consideration and genuine kindness had awakened something in her she had thought dormant. A week after their wedding, Theresa woke in the middle of the night to find Peter already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her in the moonlight that streamed through the window. "Could not sleep," she whispered. "I was thinking about you," he admitted, "about how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. "You gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. You have been so kind to me, Peter, kinder than I had any right to expect. Theresa." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. "It is not kindness anymore. These past days, getting to know you, watching you bring life back to this house, I have been falling for you. Really falling. Is that too much to say? Too soon?" Her breath caught. "No, because I have been falling too." He leaned down and kissed her, deeper than before, with a hunger that sent heat coursing through her body. Theresa kissed him back, her arms winding around his neck, and when he pulled away to look at her questioningly, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I want this. I want you." Their first time together was gentle and sweet, Peter careful to go slowly, to make sure she was comfortable. There was some pain, but it faded quickly into something else, something that built between them until Theresa cried out softly, surprised by the intensity of pleasure. After, Peter held her close, pressing kisses to her hair, her face murmuring words of love and praise that made her feel cherished. "I love you," she said into the darkness, surprising herself with how true it was. "I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Peter. I love you too." His voice was thick with emotion. "My beautiful, brave wife, I love you so much." They made love often after that, growing more confident with each other, learning what brought pleasure, building an intimacy that went beyond the physical. Their marriage, which had started as a practical arrangement, transformed into something deep and real. Summer turned to autumn, the leaves on the distant cottonwoods blazing gold, and Theresa realized she had not thought about Philadelphia in weeks. This was home now, truly home. She had friends in Sarah and a few other ranch wives who visited occasionally. She had work that satisfied her and a husband who made her laugh and challenged her mind and loved her with a steadiness that felt like bedrock. In October, she missed her monthly courses and suspected what it might mean. When she missed again in November, she told Peter over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "A baby, I think so. It is early yet, but the signs are there." He set down the cup carefully, came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he finally released her enough to see his face, there were tears on his cheeks. "I did not dare hope," he said roughly. "Anna and I tried for 2 years and it never happened. The doctor said she might not be able to carry children. I thought maybe it was me. It was not you." Theresa wiped away his tears with her thumbs. "We are going to have a baby, Peter. Are you happy?" "Happy." He laughed, the sound breaking with emotion. "Theresa, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful I can barely think straight." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Sarah came by often to check on Theresa, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from her own children's infancy. Peter became almost comically protective, insisting Theresa rest more, worrying over every twinge and complaint. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," Theresa reminded him gently one evening as they sat before the fire. "I am healthy and strong. Everything will be fine. I know." He rested his hand on her swelling belly, his expression tender. "But you are my everything, Theresa. You and this baby. If anything happened to either of you, I do not think I could survive it." "Nothing is going to happen," she promised, covering his hand with hers. "We are both going to be just fine." The baby came in early May, a long labor that left Theresa exhausted but triumphant. Sarah attended the birth along with a midwife from town, and when it was finally over and the infant's cries filled the bedroom, Peter was allowed to come in. "A son," the midwife announced, placing the cleaned and swaddled baby in Theresa's arms. "A healthy, strong son." Peter sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny face with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Theresa, he is perfect. You want to hold him." She carefully transferred the baby into Peter's arms, showing him how to support the small head. Peter cradled his son with infinite care, and Theresa saw fresh tears sliding down his face. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise you I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life, you and your beautiful mama both." They named him James, after Peter's father, and he proved to be an easy baby, quick to smile and slow to fuss. Theresa adjusted to motherhood with surprising ease, though the sleepless nights were difficult at first. Peter helped whenever he could, walking the floor with James when he was fussy at night, changing soiled cloths without complaint, absolutely besotted with his son. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love you," he told Theresa one night as they watched James sleep in the cradle Peter had built. "But somehow my heart keeps expanding. There is room for both of you, infinite room." Life on the ranch continued its rhythms through James's first year and into his second. The horse breeding business prospered, allowing Peter to hire another hand to help Samuel. Theresa's garden flourished, providing vegetables they could sell in town along with what they needed for their own table. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, they were happy. When James was 2.5, Theresa found herself pregnant again. This time the news felt less momentous, more like a natural next step. Peter was thrilled nonetheless, already talking about expanding the house to give the children more room. Their daughter arrived in the spring of 1886, smaller than James had been but just as healthy. They named her Ruth, after Theresa's mother, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue-gray eyes. "2 children," Peter said, holding Ruth while James napped on his lap. "Too big for such things, but still young enough to need his father's warmth." "I am the richest man in Idaho territory," Theresa looked at her family, her husband and their 2 beautiful children, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. 4 years ago, she had stepped off a train in Shoshone City, wearing her one good dress, desperate and alone, with nothing but hope that the stranger who met her might be kind. Peter had been more than kind. He had seen past the worn fabric and careful stitches to the woman beneath, had recognized strength and resilience, had valued what truly mattered. He had given her not just a home but a partnership, not just security but love that grew deeper with each passing day. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. Peter looked up from the children, immediately attentive. "What is it? Are you feeling all right?" "I am fine." She moved to sit beside him, laying her head on his shoulder. "I was just remembering the day we met, how terrified I was. How certain that you would take one look at me and send me back on the next train. I would never have done that." His voice was gentle. "I saw you standing there, trying so hard to be brave, and I knew, even before we spoke, I knew you were going to change my life. You changed mine." Theresa lifted her head to look at him. "You saw me, Peter, not the poverty or the shabby dress, but me. You said I was dressed for your heart, and those words meant everything. They still do." "You were dressed for my heart," he repeated, shifting Ruth carefully so he could free one arm to hold Theresa close. "And you still are. Every day, in everything you do, you are exactly what my heart needs." They sat together as the afternoon light filtered through the windows, their children drowsy and content, and Theresa thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. She had lost everything in Philadelphia, had been forced to gamble her future on a stranger's advertisement and a one-way train ticket. It had been terrifying and desperate, and the best decision she had ever made. "What are you thinking about?" Peter asked, reading the contemplative expression on her face. "How grateful I am." She squeezed his hand. "For you, for our children, for this life. I did not expect to be so happy, Peter. I hoped for safety and stability, but this, what we have, it is so much more than I dreamed possible. We built it together." He kissed her temple. "That is what makes it strong. We both brought our scars and our courage, and we used them to create something beautiful. As the children grew, so did the ranch." Peter expanded the horse breeding operation, developing a reputation for quality stock that brought buyers from as far away as Wyoming and Montana. Theresa started keeping chickens, selling eggs in town, and eventually invested in a few dairy cows. They added 2 more rooms to the house, built a proper schoolroom where Theresa taught James and Ruth their letters, and planted trees that would someday provide shade for grandchildren. The years were not without hardship. There were droughts that tested their resources, winters that seemed endless, the constant worry of illness and injury that came with frontier life. But they faced everything together, their partnership strengthened by each challenge overcome. When James turned 8, Peter began teaching him to work with the horses, and the boy showed a natural aptitude that filled his father with pride. Ruth proved to have her mother's way with growing things, spending hours in the garden, coaxing flowers to bloom in the harsh Idaho soil. Sarah Miller remained a constant friend, aging gracefully into a beloved grandmother figure who spoiled the Donnelly children shamelessly. Samuel eventually married a girl from town and moved to his own small ranch nearby, staying close enough to help Peter when needed but independent at last. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Peter surprised Theresa with a package wrapped in brown paper. She opened it to find a dress, beautiful dove gray silk with intricate lace trim, more elegant than anything she had owned even in her Philadelphia days. "Peter," she breathed, running her hands over the fine fabric. "This is too much. When did you even order this?" "I have been saving for it," he admitted, looking pleased with her reaction. I wanted you to have something beautiful, something that was not mended or made over. You deserve beautiful things, Theresa. She threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. I do not need beautiful things. I have you and the children. That is all the beauty I need. Humor me then. He held her close. Wear it tonight. I am taking you to dinner in town. Just the two of us. Sarah already agreed to watch the children. Theresa wore the gray silk dress that evening, and Peter wore his finest suit, and they rode to town in the buckboard like they were courting again. They ate at the hotel restaurant, a luxury they rarely indulged in, and talked about everything and nothing, just enjoying being together without the demands of ranch and children. You ever miss Philadelphia? Peter asked over dessert. Theresa considered the question seriously. I miss my parents, of course. I wish they could have known you and the children. But the city itself, the life I had there, no, I do not miss it at all. This is where I belong, Peter, here with you. I am glad. He reached across the table to take her hand. Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You are my partner, my best friend, my love. Everything good in my life traces back to the day you stepped off that train. In my one good dress, Theresa added with a smile. In your one good dress, he agreed. And I knew right then, looking at you, that you were going to be the making of me. They returned home late that night to find the children asleep and the house peaceful. As they prepared for bed, Theresa caught sight of her old blue dress hanging in the back of the wardrobe. She had kept it all these years, unable to throw away the garment that had brought her to this new life. I should probably get rid of that, she said, touching the faded fabric. It is practically falling apart now. Keep it, Peter said, coming to stand behind her. Keep it to remind yourself how far you have come, how much you have overcome. To remind us both, Theresa corrected, turning in his arms. We overcame it together, Peter. Everything we have, we built side by side. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and they made love with the familiarity of long practice but none of the diminished desire. If anything, Theresa wanted him more now than she had in the beginning. This man who had seen value where others saw only worn fabric, who had chosen to see her heart rather than her circumstances. The years continued their steady march. James grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility with the horses, developing his own ideas for the breeding program. Ruth remained close to her mother, learning not just household skills but also how to manage the business side of the ranch. Both children were bright and kind, a credit to their parents' patient raising. When Theresa was 38, she found herself pregnant once more, a surprise baby that made them both laugh with delighted disbelief. Peter was 41 now, his hair showing silver at the temples, but he was as strong and capable as ever. One more adventure, he said, resting his hand on her belly. One more blessing to round out our family. This baby, another son they named Thomas, proved to be their last. Theresa recovered well from the birth, but they both sensed this was nature's way of saying their family was complete. They were content with that, grateful for the 3 healthy children they had been given. As Thomas grew, James prepared to take over more of the ranch operations. At 23, he was ready for the responsibility, and Peter was more than ready to slow down slightly, to spend more time with Theresa and their younger children. I have been thinking, Peter said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. James was in town courting a girl, Ruth was putting Thomas to bed, and they had a rare moment of peace. About how this all started. What do you mean? Theresa asked, though she thought she knew. An advertisement in a newspaper, a desperate woman and a lonely man. It could have gone wrong in so many ways, but instead it gave me everything I hold dear. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the lines of her palm in a gesture grown familiar over the years. "You took such a risk, coming all this way to marry a stranger." "It did not feel like a risk once I met you," Theresa said honestly. "You made me feel safe from the very beginning. Even when you looked at my worn-out dress, you saw possibility instead of poverty." "I saw a survivor," Peter corrected. "A woman who knew how to make something last, how to care for what she had. Those qualities meant more to me than any amount of fancy clothes or dowry money." "Then you are dressed for my heart," Theresa quoted softly. "I will never forget you saying that." It was the moment I knew everything might actually be all right. It was more than all right. Peter pulled her closer, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness that had anchored her life for more than 20 years now. It was perfect. "You are perfect for me, Theresa." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear Ruth singing to Thomas, a lullaby Theresa had sung to all their children. It was a sound of home, of family, of a life well lived. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not answered your letter?" Peter asked. "If you had chosen a different advertisement, gone to California or Oregon instead?" "I try not to," Theresa admitted. "It makes me feel dizzy to think how easily we might have missed each other. If I had hesitated one more day before writing, if your letter had gone astray, if I had lost my nerve and stayed in Philadelphia. But you did not lose your nerve." Peter's voice held admiration. "You were brave enough to reach for a better life, even when you had no guarantee of what you would find. That courage, Theresa, it is one of the things I love most about you." "I was brave because I had no choice," she pointed out. "Desperation makes people do extraordinary things." "Maybe it starts with desperation," Peter agreed. "But it takes real courage to turn desperation into determination. You did that. You took the worst period of your life and used it as a springboard to something better." Theresa thought about the young woman she had been, stepping off the train in Shoshone City with nothing but a carpet bag and a prayer. She had been so frightened, so uncertain, but also quietly determined to make the best of whatever she found. Meeting Peter, seeing kindness in his eyes instead of judgment, had been the turning point. Everything good in her current life flowed from that moment. "I was lucky," she said finally. "Lucky that you were a good man. So many mail-order brides are not as fortunate." "And I was lucky that you were a good woman," Peter countered. "We could sit here all night arguing about who was more fortunate, or we can just agree that we were blessed to find each other." "Blessed," Theresa agreed. "I can accept that." Ruth appeared in the doorway, her face soft with the contentment of having settled Thomas for the night. "He wants you to say good night, Papa." Peter rose with a groan, his joints not as young as they once were. "Getting old is not for cowards," he joked, but he headed inside willingly enough, ready as always to be the father his children needed. Theresa remained on the porch a little longer, letting the peace of the evening settle into her bones. 20 years of marriage, 3 children, a successful ranch and countless memories both joyful and bittersweet. It was a rich life, fuller than anything she had imagined during those dark days in Philadelphia. The blue dress still hung in her wardrobe, too delicate now to be worn but preserved as a reminder. Sometimes she took it out and held it, remembering the woman who had worn it to meet her future husband, the woman who had been so afraid and so brave all at once. Peter returned and settled beside her again, and they sat together until the night grew too cold to remain outside. As they prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routines with the ease of long practice, Theresa felt a wave of contentment so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "What is wrong?" Peter asked immediately, noticing her expression. "Nothing is wrong," She wiped away the tears with a smile. "I am just happy, Peter, so incredibly happy. Sometimes it overwhelms me." He gathered her into his arms, holding her close. "I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and just watch you sleep, and I am amazed all over again that you are mine, that we built this life together." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, taking their time, savoring each touch and kiss. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Peter's arms around her, Theresa thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The fever that took her parents had seemed like the end of her world, but it had been a beginning too, forcing her toward a future she never would have chosen, but had come to treasure beyond measure. The advertisement in the newspaper, the terrifying journey west, the moment on the train platform when she had been sure she would be rejected, all of it had been necessary steps on the path to this life. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Peter's voice was drowsy. "For seeing me, really seeing me that first day and every day since, for loving me not despite my circumstances but including them, for building this beautiful life with me." He tightened his arms around her. "Thank you for being brave enough to come, for taking a chance on a stranger, for becoming my partner in everything. I love you, Theresa Donnelly." "I love you too," she murmured, sleep finally claiming her. The years rolled on, bringing grandchildren and new challenges and the quiet satisfaction of watching their children build lives of their own. James married his sweetheart and brought her to live at the ranch, taking over most of the daily operations. Ruth eventually married a schoolteacher from town, a gentle man who loved her fierce independence. Peter and Theresa settled into the rhythms of older age, still partners, still in love, still reaching for each other in the night. They built a smaller house at the edge of the ranch property, giving the main house to James and his growing family. But they remained involved in the business and the lives of their children and grandchildren. On their 30th anniversary, Peter was 56 and Theresa was 53, both gray-haired now but still healthy and active. Their family gathered for a celebration, the house full of children and grandchildren, laughter and love abundant. That evening, after everyone had gone home and they sat alone on the porch of their small house, Peter pulled out a package Theresa had not noticed earlier. "Another dress," she teased, taking the package. "Open it and see." Inside was a photograph, professionally done, showing Theresa standing beside Peter on their wedding day. She stared at it in shock. She had no memory of anyone taking a photograph. "Reverend Matthews took it," Peter explained. "He had borrowed a camera from someone in town. I only just got the photograph developed recently, found the negative among his things after he passed. I wanted to have it restored and framed properly before showing you." Theresa studied the image, seeing the young woman she had been, the faded blue dress that had somehow become part of their love story, the way Peter looked at her even then with such tenderness. They looked impossibly young and impossibly hopeful. "Look at us," she whispered. "We were just babies." "We were brave," Peter corrected, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "And we were smart enough to recognize something good when we found it." She leaned into him, still holding the photograph. "We have had a good life, Peter, a really, truly good life." "The best," he agreed. "And it is not over yet. We have years left, Theresa. Years to watch our grandchildren grow, to help James with the ranch, to just enjoy being together." He was right. They had several more good years, watching the family expand, taking pride in what they had built together. Peter lived to see his first great-grandchild, a boy James's eldest daughter named Peter in his honor. He held the baby in his weathered hands and cried tears of joy, surrounded by family and love. When Peter finally passed, at the age of 68, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Theresa beside him as she had been for 39 years. She grieved deeply, but she did not regret a single day they had shared. He had been her partner, her best friend, her great love, and while she missed him terribly, she was grateful for every moment they had been given. She lived several more years herself, long enough to ensure the ranch would continue to prosper under James's capable management, long enough to tell her story to grandchildren and great-grandchildren who wanted to know how she and Grandpa Peter had met. She always told it the same way, with love and honesty, explaining about the advertisement, the desperate circumstances, the worn blue dress, and the cowboy who had seen past all of it to the woman beneath. "Then you are dressed for my heart," she would quote, and her eyes would grow misty with the memory. "That is what he said to me, and from that moment I knew I was home." When Theresa finally passed, at the age of 71, the family buried her beside Peter in the small cemetery on the ranch property, under the shadow of the mountains they had both loved. Her old blue dress, carefully preserved all those years, was placed in a trunk with other family treasures, a reminder to future generations of where they came from and what their great-great-grandmother had survived to build this legacy. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, along with the story of the mail-order bride who arrived with nothing but courage and one good dress, and the cowboy who had been wise enough to see that she was dressed for his heart. It became a family legend, a reminder that love could be found in the most unlikely circumstances, that courage and kindness mattered more than wealth or circumstance, and that the best things in life often came from the bravest leaps of faith. And in the evening, when the sun set over the Idaho mountains painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, if you stood very still in just the right spot on the ranch, some said you could almost feel their presence, Peter and Theresa Donnelly, still watching over the land and family they had built together, still partners even in whatever came after, their love story woven into the very fabric of the place they had called home.